To be honest, from the very beginning, I didn't want to go anywhere. Barbecues, of course, are good, but all these overnight stays in tents and the eternal search for special places always seemed overrated to me. However, Artyom was adamant. For a week now, he couldn't shut up about some amazing lake that he had dug up on one of his stalker forums. The purest water. No one around. Not a single living soul for miles, he repeated so often that at some point it was easier for me to agree just so he would shut up. The preparations, of course, were also led by Artyom. We bought some unimaginable amount of meat. When he loaded the third container into the car, I cautiously remarked that we weren't going to feed a company of soldiers, but it was impossible to convince Artyom. You don't understand. My marinade is just a bomb. You'll be begging for more. We took tents, sleeping bags, a couple of tourist burners, and a folding grill. Katya and Lena were arguing whether it was worth hauling a whole watermelon with them. I just shook my head. It was clear that we would take half of the food back, but I didn't argue. In general, we got together and went to this mysterious and terribly special place. Lena was nervous from the very morning, although she tried not to show it. She didn't like our spontaneous adventures at all, although she never openly said so. But Katya, on the contrary, was delighted and talked incessantly about how great a time we would have and how great it was that we finally got together. I just nodded and smiled, trying to catch the wave of general fun, although for some reason my heart was uneasy from the very beginning. The road was lousy. The car shook. Tree branches scraped the sides, as if trying to stop us and make us turn back. The GPS was hopelessly glitchy, sometimes claiming that we were driving on water, or even sending us off the map. I tried not to pay attention, but I could see from Lena's face that it was bothering not only me. When a village appeared ahead, I breathed a sigh of relief, which meant we had at least arrived somewhere. True, the relief did not last long. The village was as if lifeless, gloomy, lopsided houses with boarded-up windows, half-ruined fences, empty, overgrown yards. The atmosphere here was so heavy, as if this place was being held in darkness by force. I was about to press the gas pedal to pass this oppressive landscape as soon as possible, when out of the corner of my eye I noticed movement in the window of one of the houses. I slowed down and looked more closely. There stood an old woman. Her wrinkled, pale face was frozen in anxiety. She was looking directly at us, with her eyes wide open. Then her lips moved quickly, as if she were saying a prayer, and the old woman frantically crossed herself. The next moment the shutters slammed loudly, cutting her off from us, and us from her. A wonderful little place, Katya muttered. Artyom grunted, but his voice lacked its former confidence. Lena, on the other hand, turned away, looking out the window, and said quietly, almost in a whisper, "Maybe it's better to go back?" Artyom laughed louder than usual, obviously trying to release the tension, and waved his hand. "Oh, come on, Len. It's just an abandoned village. What are you so scared of?" I silently pressed the gas. The car jerked again and crept further along the overgrown road, leading us deeper into the forest, away from the strange house and the anxious old woman. But no matter how hard I tried to think about the future dinner and fragrant kebabs, a strange, viscous feeling did not leave me. A few kilometers later, the road got even worse, if that was even possible. I cursed several times, going around particularly deep potholes, and at some point I couldn't take it anymore. Well, how much further is it? Maybe we should find a simpler place. Huh? Artyom, who was B, buried in his phone and stubbornly trying to defeat his dying GPS, waved me off. "No, everything's fine. It's a maximum of half an hour left. I'm telling you, it's worth it. We're not turning back now." Arguing was pointless. I sighed and focused on the road again. I tried not to think about how much I wanted to hit Artyom over the head for his eternal thirst for adventure. Gradually, I began to notice that on both sides of the road, right on the branches of the trees, there were some strange figures hanging. Looking closer, I felt a cold sweat break out. Small rag dolls were hanging from the trees. They had no faces. Instead of eyes, a black scorched hole. Katya also noticed them and snorted with laughter, joking about some primitive pagans who had forgotten to look at the calendar and were still performing some of their rituals. Lena, looking out the window on the other hand, tensed up even more and quietly said that maybe this was still a sign and we should think about going back. Artyom, obviously amused, began to tease her, saying, "How could you possibly be scared of some ridiculous dolls?" I looked in the rearview mirror and flinched. It seemed that one of the dolls had swung on a branch and turned around, looking after us. Of course it was just the wind, I told myself, and tried to get the strange thought out of my head. After a few turns, the forest parted, and we saw the lake. I must admit, Artyom didn't lie. The place turned out to be incredibly beautiful. A crystal-clear expanse of water, surrounded by a ring of dense forest, a perfectly flat meadow, as if specially created to set up camp and light a fire. Even Lena, it seems, calmed down a bit and smiled for the first time all day. We quickly set up camp. Artyom set up the grill, and soon the dizzying aroma of fried meat wafted along the lake shore. The kebabs really turned out to be incredibly delicious. The meat was tender, with a barely perceptible hint of dark beer and garlic. And, I must admit, I finally relaxed for real. When it was completely dark and bright stars shone overhead, Artyom suddenly fell silent, looking somewhere towards the trees. Then he smiled his special smile, which always made me feel a little uneasy, and said quietly, as if remembering something important, "By the way, about those dolls we saw on the way, I forgot to tell you the most interesting thing. They don't just hang here for nothing." Artyom paused for a moment, as if deliberately building up the atmosphere, and then began to speak. Seriously, not at all like usual. The flame of the fire trembled. The reflections flickered across his face, making his eyes look strangely alien and gloomy. In short, I found something interesting on the forum. Once upon a time, pagans lived in these places, real wild ones. They worshipped the spirit of this very forest that surrounds us. Only that was not a kind spirit to whom you bring flowers and berries. No, he demanded human sacrifices, and every year, if they didn't bring him a sacrifice, he would come himself and take everyone indiscriminately. I tried to smile and looked at Lena. She was sitting tense, clinging to a plastic cup as if she was afraid of dropping it. Artyom continued, looking directly into the fire. Every year, the village would choose the weakest person, the one who was sick or old, or simply the one who had displeased the others in some way. The unfortunate person was tied up hand and foot, and at night, when it became completely dark, they were taken into the forest. Shepherds with lanterns and bells always went ahead. They believed that the ringing of the bells drove away evil spirits, and at the same time showed the way to the master of the forest, so that he wouldn't get lost and would definitely take the sacrifice. So, the person was brought to a huge ancient tree where their throat was cut. The blood flowed to the ground and soaked into the roots, and the body was left to die under the branches. The tree grew on blood. Its roots went so deep that people believed it connected our world with the world of spirits. Artyom's voice became even lower and quieter. And after the ritual, in memory of the one who was killed, the villagers sewed a rag doll with scorched eyes. They believed that the soul of the victim moved into the doll and remained forever tied to this place, serving as proof for the forest spirit that the debt had been paid. The dolls were hung on trees around the village to create a protective barrier that would not let evil into the houses. These figures not only protected, but also reminded the forest of the ancient agreement. The payment has been made, and the hunt must stop until the next year. He fell silent, and in the ensuing silence, only the crackling of logs in the fire could be heard. The most terrifying thing, Artyom added after a pause, is that all this was not in ancient times, but it lasted almost until our days. Even in the 90s, legends and rumors circulated about these places. When the authorities learned about these sacrifices, The police were sent here to investigate, but the village was found completely empty. Not a single person, living or dead. Only these dolls on the trees. Hundreds of dolls, fresh footprints on the ground and a bloody tree. The people disappeared without a trace. He looked up at us. They say they went deep into the forest and committed mass suicide to finally unite with the spirit. But there is another version. They didn't die, but are still living somewhere here, deep in the thicket, and continue to go hunting every year, carrying lanterns and bells. They are looking for a new victim to feed the spirit and preserve the immortality. And if at night in the forest you suddenly hear the ringing of bells, it means they are already nearby. It means you are next. He said the last words so quietly that I could barely make them out, with the remnants of the dying embers. Lena noticeably paled. Katya snorted contemptuously, saying that she had never heard a stupider or more boring story in her life. But I noticed how her hand trembled when she reached for another piece of meat. And I, although I understood that all this was just another campfire horror story, for some reason I couldn't tear my eyes away from the dark wall of the forest, in which now something alive and very hungry seemed to be lurking. Closer to night, we began to head to our tents. Lena and Katya to theirs, Artyom and I to ours. I wished the girls good night, but before I closed the tent, I caught a glimpse of some glitter in the distance, something that looked like the light of a flashlight. But could there be anyone else in such a remote place besides us? "What are you rummaging around for? The mosquitoes will attack," Artyom hissed at me. I shook my head and quickly closed the tent. Artyom almost immediately started snoring, but sleep was a long time coming for me. I tossed and turned, unable to get the story I had heard around the campfire out of my head. I wanted to convince myself that it was all nonsense, but I kept remembering the old woman's face in the village, the strange dolls on the trees and their empty, scorched eye sockets. I woke up to a strange sound, a quiet, barely audible ringing of bells, as if the wind was gently swinging them somewhere very far away. At first I thought I was just imagining things, that my sleepy head was still making up Artyom's ridiculous horror stories. I pulled my sleeping bag up higher and closed my eyes, trying to fall back asleep. But a few minutes later I was woken up by another sound, a much more distinct one. Footsteps, heavy, slow, cautious. I could clearly hear dry branches breaking under. Someone's feet. I sat up and listened, feeling anxiety rising in my chest. This could no longer be part of a dream. I cautiously nudged Artyom, who grunted in displeasure and asked, "What's wrong?" "Someone's walking around," I whispered, getting out. Artyom reluctantly followed me, and we woke up the girls. Lena got out of the tent first, followed by Katya, annoyed and sleepy. "What happened?" she asked, rubbing her eyes. I didn't have time to answer. We all froze at the same time, staring into the depths of the forest. Lights from lanterns began to appear among the trees. First one, then a second, a third. Soon there were many, dozens, if not hundreds. Flickering and swaying, they were approaching our camp, accompanied by a quiet, increasingly distinct ringing of bells. Lena grabbed Katya's hand and sobbed. I told you. I felt that we shouldn't have come here." We were, paralyzed with panic for only a second. Then, as if on cue, we rushed to the car. The tents and things were left lying on the ground. We didn't care about them now. Reaching the car, I groaned in despair. The tires were flat, not just punctured, but literally slashed, as if someone had meticulously made sure that we wouldn't leave this place. The tracks around the car clearly showed that someone had been here very recently. We feverishly looked at each other. "Run!" Artyom yelled. There were no other options. We rushed back along the road, desperately trying to remember the way, but the forest around us seemed to come to life, to close in, to change. Where we had come from during the day, there was now a solid wall of trees. The GPS on the phone showed that we were right in the middle of the lake, which seemed absurd and insane. Damn it! Artyom cursed and rushed headlong through. Out the trees. Follow me. The lanterns and bells continued to chase us. The ringing was getting louder, denser. It seemed to be coming from all sides now. We walked straight through the forest. There was no point in looking for the road anymore. It was as if it had never existed. The tree trunks around us were identical, dead and black in the twilight of the night. Artyom was first. I was behind him. The branches lashed painfully at my face. My breath was failing. My side ached from the fast pace. Lena was breathing erratically behind me. A little further away, I could hear Katya's footsteps. The ringing continued, becoming constant and annoying, like the buzzing of a huge swarm of insects. The lanterns flickered, to the right, then to the left. It was as if the figures were trying to trap us, to force us to turn somewhere we shouldn't. Suddenly I stopped and turned around. My heart sank somewhere, and despair flared up in my chest. Lena was behind me. Her eyes were full of horror, and Katya was gone. Katya, I gasped and took a few steps back. Katya. No one answered. Only the bells, which seemed to be mocking me, ringing lightly in the night darkness. She was right here. I heard her footsteps. Katya? There was no answer. Katya had disappeared. I suddenly realized that Artyom's legend, which he had told around the campfire, could be the absolute truth. The realization made me sick. The ringing sounded again from behind, and I turned around sharply. Run, fast. We rushed into the darkness, indiscriminately, not seeing the way, not choosing a direction. The forest thickened, intertwined. The branches seemed to grab at our clothes, cling to our faces, ripping the skin until it bled. It seemed like we were walking in circles. Artyom disappeared next. At first, he fell behind by just a few meters, and we didn't pay attention to it. And then his desperate scream, full of animal horror, rang out. He yelled so loudly that the hair on the back of my neck stood up. Lena rushed in that direction, but I abruptly stopped her and pulled her in the opposite direction. Forward, otherwise, we're next. They were taking us one by one, slowly, methodically, like hunters playing with their prey, before delivering the final blow. Now there were only two of us. We made our way forward, like blind people, falling and getting up again, feeling the figures with lanterns silently following us, tightening the ring. Finally, Lena, exhausted by fear and pain, stumbled, fell to her knees, and could not get up. I can't anymore, Dim, she sobbed. I can't. I bent down, trying to lift her, when I suddenly saw a bony hand emerge from the darkness and rudely, sharply grab Lena's ankle. She shrieked, tried to break free, but then several more hands grabbed her by the shoulders, hair, and clothes. She was literally torn from my hands, dragged into the blackness of the forest, as if into the maw of a huge, invisible monster. Dima, help! Her last cry, full of pain and horror, was heard, cut short a few seconds later. Lena. In response, only a muffled ringing of bells and the flickering of lanterns in the darkness. Now I was completely alone. My heart was pounding, as if it was about to burst into pieces. I ran, having lost all hope, my consciousness completely switched off, guided only by animal fear and despair. I tried to break free from this monstrous trap. The forest surrounded me on all sides, mockingly playing pushing and guiding me, as if it were the one who had started this terrible hunt. Behind me and on the sides, footsteps sounded again, a quiet rustle of clothes, a light jingling of bells. Lanterns flickered between the trees, gathering together, like a pack of hungry wolves. I ran, not knowing where or why, just so as not to see, not to hear, not to feel, because what was happening was already impossible to bear. I ran somewhere, not understanding whether I was alive or this was a terrible dream. Just forward, just away from these bells and flickering lights. Suddenly I ran out into a strange clearing. In the middle stood a huge tree whose branches stretched to the sky like crooked fingers. The soil around it was dark, moist. There was a metallic smell in the air, so thick and strong that it stung my throat. And then I saw them, all three of the bodies. Lena, Artyom, Katya. Their heads were bowed. Their eyes were open, glassy, cloudy. The throats of my friends were slit. Their bodies were decorated with stab wounds, from each of which blood was seeping. Without stopping, it streamed down the roots of the tree, going deep into the earth. Lena was tied up like a sheep before a sacrifice. The ropes dug into her skin, leaving crimson stripes. Her hair was matted with blood. Her mouth was slightly open in a silent scream. Katya was a little to the side, leaning against the trunk. To her left was Artyom. His chest was stabbed, but his face still held an expression of horror and pain. It seemed as if he was looking right at me. Right there on the tree, hundreds, dozens of dolls with scorched eyes were hanging. 4 of them were brand new. 3 were hanging over the heads of my friends, and the 4th one took my breath away. I realized that it was meant for me. Without thinking, I automatically tore off the doll. A silly hope flashed inside me that if the doll was mine, then without it, they wouldn't be able to complete the ritual. The figures froze, as if in fright. Their lanterns trembled. A murmur was heard. Not even words, but some kind of animal expression of horror. Exactly. It dawned on me. The dolls are there. Protection. That's what Artyom said. It's something like a contract with the forest spirit. I quickly began to tear off the dolls one after another, feeling my strength return to me. The figures scurried about. Some began to run away in all directions. The lanterns went out. The bells continued to ring, but now, more and more anxiously, almost hysterically. I was tearing off the dolls one after another, rejoicing at the effect I was producing. Suddenly, in the distance, in the very depths of the thicket, a sound was heard, as if something ancient and terrifying was beginning to awaken. An echo rolled through the entire forest. I felt fear spread like a cold chill down my spine. The figures around me were hunters, murderers, but someone was also hunting them. Someone more ancient, more terrifying. The spirit of the forest. Chaos was building up all around. The figures were running in all directions trying to escape. They were throwing their lanterns, wailing. They were trying to hide, completely forgetting about me. The sound was heard again, this time closer. Now I could clearly hear screams of horror and pleas for mercy. Without waiting for what would happen next, I started to run, not looking back. I don't know how long I wandered through the forest, maybe an hour, maybe a day, but by some miracle, I still found the road. The forest reluctantly let me go. In the distance, dawn was breaking. I was picked up by a truck driver when I ran out onto the road. He stopped immediately when he saw me, barefoot, with torn clothes and eyes that probably couldn't express anything human anymore. I remember how I silently got into the car, how my accidental savior kept asking, "Who are you? What happened? Where are your friends?" I couldn't find the strength to answer. I just sat there, looking out the window at the cursed forest. And even when the trees parted and the fields began, I kept expecting to see the light of a lantern or to hear the quiet ringing of bells among the grass. And what's that? The driver gestured somewhere down. I looked down and saw that I was still holding one of those creepy dolls with scorched eyes. If you liked the story, you can support the channel with a like and subscription. See you later.